Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is once destroying Joe Manchin over his obvious corruption that nobody can dispute at this point. And we're gonna break down exactly what she said, but first you need to understand Joe Manchin and what effect he's having on the ongoing domestic conversation about doing something about climate change. I know it's easy to think nothing's being done. In effect, that's kind of how it is, but there are negotiations going on. So Joe Manchin recently was quoted as saying, "I'm very reluctant to go down the path of electric vehicles. I'm old enough to remember standing in line in 1974 trying to buy gas. I remember those days. I don't want to have to be standing in line waiting for a battery for my vehicle because we're now dependent on a foreign supply chain, mostly China." So there's a lot there. There is the possibility that Joe Manchin thinks that batteries and EVs are changed like batteries and other things. I could be wrong, but Jessica, I think his comments leave open the possibility that he has a bit of an issue understanding how these batteries function.
Joe Manchin was so unintentionally funny with this comment because I'm just picturing what his imagination looks like of like going to get a new pack of Duracell for his vehicle. It's hilarious, but then on the one hand, you wonder like maybe he's absolutely not ignorant and he's trying to tie what's going on with gas to batteries and to electric cars, so his constituents stay behind him. That gas prices are on their mind, so he's going to draw this parallel that actually isn't there.
Yeah, it is possible that he thinks like you go to the store. I'll take 2,000 D cells. That's not actually how it works. Now Tesla had talked briefly about doing hot swapping of batteries. That never went anywhere. That is not how it functions. By the way, like you talking about him tying it to gas prices, I want everyone to stop and think about how insidious what he is saying actually is. He is using the fact that gas prices go up and sometimes you have to wait for gas, not in decades, but let's say hypothetically you did, as an argument not to get off of gas. Like he's reminding everyone of how terrible our system of fueling our cars are so that we will keep that exact system. Think about that for a second. Anyway, also, let's say that generally he means that we need batteries from abroad, and so maybe you have to wait for a car to be made. Okay, here's an idea. Then let's invest in making them domestically, which by the way, we already are. There are 13 new electric vehicle battery factories planned for the US in just the near future. That was announced last year. There's no reason he couldn't know that. Some of the locations for those, by the way, have not even been picked yet. In theory, if he wasn't so invested personally in fossil fuels, he could be pushing for West Virginia to be the site of one of those factories. Why not? I'm sure they could use the jobs. Anyway, in terms of the minerals that are needed for these, Biden wanted to put more money into domestic production of those. Manchin's not in favor of that anyway. He also, by the way, attacks Democrats for wanting to spend money on EV charging stations, saying he has a hard time understanding the use of government money for charging stations. Quote, "I've read history and I remember Henry Ford inventing the Model T, but I sure as hell don't remember the US government building filling stations. The market did that." The crowd erupted with applause. This is not a regular crowd, by the way. These are industry lobbyists and stuff like that agree with Joe Manchin on energy, but like, yes, gradually, when nobody had cars and they were gradually replacing like horses and stuff, yes, we naturally built it out. We have a climate emergency right now, and we're fine subsidizing certain industries, by the way. We still subsidize the fossil fuel companies. I think it's a bit weird to say that subsidizing an up and coming industry that he's saying we're lagging on, there's huge flaws in logic here, Jessica.
Yeah, totally. I mean, even drawing the parallel of, well, if we have to get batteries from China, we're depending on some foreign country that we don't want to support. When the reason gas prices are high right now is partially because people are talking about sanctioning Russia. And I think that's really interesting because if we want to compete with China, well, how did China get to this position of being a number one producer of these batteries? They invested in it. They invested in building clean energy infrastructure. And so if we want to compete with them, how about instead of subsidizing the oil industry, we invest in it ourselves? But Joe Manchin, of course, doesn't want to make that argument.
Is the only thing that's going to save us like if the battery manufacturing industry starts buying politicians? Because right now it's just like the oil and coal, they own a lot of media, they own a lot of politicians, and so I guess just nothing else can break in, even if all of their points are directly contradicted by how this thing would go down. In any event, but by the way, his opposition to building out that EV infrastructure was consequential. House Democrats had proposed in the infrastructure bill that was passed, the bipartisan one, they put $7.5 billion into it. They wanted to expand that to $85 billion. It wouldn't just be for the charging infrastructure, but a lot of it would be. No, some powerful, influential Democrats think it's a joke. So no, it's gonna be a little bit harder. It's gonna take a little bit longer to build it out. Great for regular Americans. In any event, as I said, the fact that he is taking these positions clearly because he has a financial interest with fossil fuels did not escape a lot of people, including Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who says, truly bizarre how in Washington, it's totally allowed and acceptable to accept hundreds of thousands in fossil fuel money and own millions in fossil fuel investments while brazenly killing clean energy policy. But what's not acceptable is raising that fact and questioning the connection. She acknowledges, same goes for pretty much every other industry too, though, big pharma, Wall Street, etc. And she is totally right. The fact that he has not just the sort of vested interest that a lot of them do, that they receive checks from these industries, that they think about the possibility of going, someday to serve on a corporate board or something like that. All of that can pervert our political outcomes. But he himself owns a coal company. The idea that he should be able to weigh in on any of this, Jessica, just seems maddening to me.
Yeah, I mean, we can't expect our representatives to represent us if they're in there trying to represent these companies. I mean, it's a clear conflict of interest. And the fact that we have legislation being introduced to potentially, stop insider trading is huge, but very few people are talking about that.
Exactly. Yeah, we've tried to make a big focus on it here multiple times. It's the sort of topic though that, man, if they don't ram it through almost instantly, there are so many in Congress that are just gonna happily watch it die, including Nancy Pelosi, by the way. She was against it in the first place. She backed off a little bit once there was pressure, but as of right now, she's getting what she wants. It isn't a big focus of our national conversation, which I get. People are rightfully outraged at what's happening in Ukraine and all of that. But it does drain a little bit of the room for other conversations, like changing individual stock ownership. And by the way, we definitely need to do that. We need to change that. We've seen, even with Ukraine, war profiteering from people like Marjorie Greene, as well as a number of others, including Democrats, including senators. But owning an industry and then getting to choose what legislation passes or doesn't that would regulate that industry, I just do not understand, other than the fact that our system is controlled by the wealthy, how that could possibly be legal. What do you think?
Yeah, I think what we've got to do is, if you saw on International Women's Day, there was this bot that was tweeting back on corporations like Goldman Sachs what their pay gap was. We need a bot that's just scraping open secrets data. And anytime a politician, a member of Congress tweets, they reply back with their stock holdings, every single time.
I like that. Yeah, definitely. We need to get someone to set that up. Maybe that kid who's tracking Elon Musk's jet or something. He seems pretty tech savvy. We can get him working on it. Anyway, really fast, I do want to let you know that also recently Sarah Bloom Raskin was up to head the Fed. She apparently pretty good on climate issues. Joe Manchin wasn't accepting it specifically because of her position on climate, so they sunk that. How one person holds so much power over the future of our legislation in the area of climate change. But don't worry, it's only a crisis that we're not addressing. By the way, I wanted to give AOC credit on one other thing. Stephanie Ruhle had pointed out, and the news was all over the place yesterday, that oil dropped back down below $100 a barrel. It might have risen a little bit above that now, and it is still higher than it was a few months ago. I think at one point, not that long ago, it had been about $67 a barrel or something like that. But if the price is going down, why isn't the price of gasoline going down? Isn't this what they hide behind? That there's nothing we can do. It's not price gouging. The price is up, but the price isn't up. So if there's any logic to the world, we should see the price of gasoline go down in the near future.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. I think, it might not technically be price gouging, but if we were to ask, okay, you're increasing the price, but you could still be profitable if you kept prices the same. Now we've got working people struggling to pay their bills. They can hardly afford to drive to work or bring their kids to school. is this ethical? Like it might not technically be price gouging, but it can still be entirely unethical.
Yeah, I feel like it is.
Yeah.
Like I understand profit to a regular person, the fact that they're profiting seems like enough. To them, no, profits can never go down. Line must always go up. I get that, but especially now when like more and more people are being asked to once again start commuting to work, we got to get the price down. And look, doing something to like forcibly lower the price is so far beyond anything I can imagine Joe Biden doing or anything like that, but something's got to be done. And like at least we have some representatives who are talking about it a little bit, but in terms of it being a national priority for the Democrats, it just doesn't really seem like it.
Yeah, I had this moment where I was like watching Fox and they were really pushing the Biden administration to take action to increase domestic production. And of course, domestic production in the US is down because at the beginning of the pandemic, we saw the price of oil tank, less people were investing in, building new rigs and drilling new wells. And so it's gonna be an investment for these companies to increase production domestically. And I was like, that's probably exactly why Fox is trying to put pressure on the administration, because if they subsidize that initial cost, their profit margins are gonna be huge.
Yeah, I mean, they're already among the most profitable corporations ever on our planet. Wickedly profitable and constantly uncertain and scared of any risk whatsoever. That's a weird combination.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.